Good for you.
So, as an official start then to the interview, welcome to Alchemist of Swing. My name is April DeShields, and we are sitting talking with Mr. Hal Smith. If you happen to do a Google search on him, he is not the voice actor. He is the jazz drummer. Don't go down that rabbit hole unless you really, really want to. But Hal, you and I have been friends for probably more years than either of us would care to count. I think we met many years ago in Sacramento in a musician's lounge somewhere. That would have had to have been the only place.
That sounds right.
That sounds about right. And what I remember first about meeting you, because I don't remember the first time I met you, I apologize, but I don't. It's many years ago and many vodkas ago, was the fact that all the musicians that I was hanging around with at that time, because I was the kid who schlepped CDs and helped out with stuff and basically just hung out, was the fact that all the musicians that I was with wanted to see your band. Now, for me, that was a big deal because, as you know, with what you do, most of the time the musicians, especially at a festival, they're just so overwhelmed with all this stuff and you have to be here and you have to do this, so that when they have time to themselves, you're resting, you're relaxing, you're eating, you're getting some stuff done. You're not necessarily going to go out to go see another band. I mean, is
Right?
that a fair statement?
That's very fair and very true.
Yeah, so what hit me the most as a kid, well, teenager, whatever, how old I was that the musicians that I was with, all excellent caliber musicians, wanted to go see your band because that was like the musicians group, if you will, that everybody kind of wanted to go see. So that's what first affected me the most about you, is like, huh, okay, these guys never want to go see anybody, even if they're great old pals and they're great musicians. So if they want to make the effort, then I really should make sure I'm paying attention and listening, because there's something here. And sure enough, there was. I think when you and I talked earlier, it was the Roadrunners.
Yeah, sounds right.
So I'm fairly confident, because I think I do remember Bobby being on clarinet at some
Yep.
point or another, and I do remember it being a small group. And tell me a little bit about how you came up with the idea of the Roadrunners, being that this was basically the band all the musicians wanted to take their time to go see.
It was actually suggested to me by the late Tom Rippey, who was with the Puget Sound Traditional Jazz Society up in Seattle.
Mhm.
And we'd been talking about my playing a concert there with a small band, and he suggested the personnel.
Oh.
And one by one, every suggestion he made, I thought, well, how could I turn that down? That sounds great. And the original band was Bobby Gordon on clarinet, Ray Shelbred on piano, Becky Kilgore on guitar and vocals, Mike Duffy on string bass, and me.
Mhm.
And except for times when Mike and Ray had to take off because of teaching obligations when they were still teaching, that was the band. And
Right.
it took off right away from our first concert.
Yeah.
And we were able to play almost all of the West Coast festivals.
Yeah.
And it was very, very popular until it just didn't exist anymore. And that
Yeah.
happens with good bands. But I remember looking out in the audience and seeing uh, really, really great musicians who came
Mhm.
to hear the band. And it always makes you feel like you've done the right thing, at least for the musicians.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I grew up with them, so I didn't know anything different. So I didn't know, I just knew that it was unusual that they wanted to make such a concerted effort to be able to see as many of your sets as possible. So, and then the first time I saw you guys and listened to you guys, would probably be the more accurate term, like, okay, that's why.
We lucked out with that band too, because we had such great sit-ins and guests, especially at Sacramento.
Mhm.
And a few of the other festivals, we had people like Jim Galloway sitting
Yeah.
with the band, and Tommy Newsom.
Mhm.
And it was always just a blast to hear a two-reed front line with Bobby and Jim Galloway or Tommy
Yeah.
Newsom or somebody like that, and Bob Havens, Ed Polser, Peter Eklund. Dan Barrett. We always had good people sitting in with that band, and I'll always remember how much fun we all had.
Well, and it just, like you said, you can't go wrong with any single person in that particular band. And when you have that caliber of musicianship, I mean, if you get invited to sit in, heck, go for it. I know that Galloway really liked doing that, because he was one of the people I was always hanging around with at Sacramento anyway. And it just such a good sense of humor too, so that everybody was just so relaxed on stage. And that's something I always, whether I realize it immediately or not, I always hone in on how relaxed do these people look or play, because you can really tell an awful lot about, I get, that's kind of hard to explain, I suppose, but you can really tell an awful lot about how much they love what they do, how much they respect the material they're presenting. If you kind of, from body language and everything else, you really see how much they enjoy it, or how relaxed they are, or even how unselfish they are by being able to share and put other people in the spotlight instead of trying to hog it all. Does that make any sense whatsoever?
Yeah, it does, and that's one of the things I think about when I put a band together, besides the music, how will this person sound in a rhythm section with this person? I always think how are they going to react to each other?
Yeah.
And you got one genius who makes everyone else nervous.
Yeah.
It's not going to work.
Mm-mm.
And the really great players are nice people, I've
Yeah.
found, and everybody
Intense.
gets along, and it's a team effort.
Yeah.
And that's what makes a great band. And I always try to do that. I've been pretty lucky with it. A few times it hasn't worked, but for the most part, I've been very, very fortunate to find people who are compatible on and off the bandstand.
Well, as a leader, those are very specific points that you have to think about. You know, if you're going to spend any length of time together, you've got to be able to. The genius is in the mix. So it's one of the things I appreciated so much about Benny Goodman. He put together such incredible groups, from big bands to small bands, anywhere in the world. And Benny, of course, we could probably spend an entire day with Benny Goodman stories, but I think that mentality that you've just mentioned that you've had to do is very similar to something that he did. I'm sure he had to actively think about it, but it's a talent. It's an additional talent besides your musicianship and your instrument. You almost have to have a talent of putting together people.
I try.
You do an excellent job. Just across the board recordings, things that you and I discussed that I had never heard before. So I learn more about Hal Smith every day now.
I'm sorry.
No, it's my pleasure, honestly. For speaking of Roadrunners in that lineup, though, the choice of one horn consistently with that rhythm section, you and I had talked at some point, and you said you actually really enjoyed having small group with clarinet. What about that is so enjoyable for you?
Well, when it's somebody the class of Bobby Gordon or Kim Cusack or someone like that, they're not bound by having to play a part in a front line.
Mm-hmm.
It's all on them to make
Yeah.
everything happen. And you get the right reed player, it can be spectacular.
Yeah.
You know, if they're just the least bit inspired by what's going on behind them or the audience, it would be like the Benny Goodman trio or quartet.
Yeah.
Or the Jelly Roll Morton trio, or something like that. And I love full bands. I would like to work with one 24/7, 365, but there's something special about playing with a small group with a really inventive and creative clarinetist in front. And the same on piano. Even if it's just a trio, good strong piano player with a good left hand, between the left hand and my bass drum, we can take care of the bass. So
was the 1962 live Firehouse 5 album that your dad had. What about that stuck out so strongly to you as a child that the light bulb went off?
Well, I grew up during the jazz revival. So Dixieland and New Orleans and traditional jazz was still popular when I was really small, and the family didn't have much of a record collection. I did hear some ragtime that my father had, and he also had a Jelly Roll Morton 78. So I heard Morton when I was 3 or 4 years old,
Mhm.
and that's still one of my very favorite things in life. But you could hear on the radio, hear banjo and honky tonk piano because it was still popular as a kind of ancillary to the New Orleans revival. And records back then didn't cost very much, and you can get a dime store record of a Matty Matlock band for $1.98, you know. And
Yeah.
I had a lot of those things because my parents knew I was interested in the music, and they'd pick those things up for me. And I liked it, but I wasn't very distinguishing between stylistic references or anything. It just sounded good. It was a music I enjoyed. Then we happened to get a record by the Firehouse 5, and it just, something clicked when I heard that. And I thought, that's really neat. I really like that. And they were playing at Disneyland right up the highway from where we lived. And my parents offered to take me there for my birthday to hear the band. And I wrote to Ward Kimball, the leader, and he sent back a letter saying where they were going to be and what time and all that, their summer schedule. And we went up to hear the band. And that was just like a bolt of lightning off the bandstand to me. That was the first live jazz I'd heard. Everything else up to then had been on record. So hearing that, just, I was hooked, you know, within 4 bars.
Yeah.
And then I got to meet the guys on the intermission, and they were all super nice and encouraging. And every time I'd go back after that, they'd recognize me and take time to talk to me and encourage me. If they'd blown me off for interrupting their intermission, I'd probably be a mad scientist now instead of a fast drummer. But I've always appreciated the fact that they were so kind when I was trying to learn about the music. The same with Turk Murphy. When I met him, he was very encouraging. Lou Waters, when I met him, he was encouraging. Wally Rose, all of the West Coast musicians. That was the music I really liked the most at that time. And nobody told me you're on the wrong track or don't do this. You know, they just encouraged me to keep going. I was kind of on my own about finding other styles though, because I only liked the San Francisco style for so long because I knew the people. I mean, I could write a letter to Lou Waters and get a response. I couldn't write to King Oliver.
Right.
You know.
Yeah.
But eventually it dawned on me after reading dozens and dozens of liner notes, oh, this tune I like came from King Oliver. I should try to find that. And it was kind of difficult to find the older records when I was growing up. I mean, I could go to a discount store and buy a Firehouse 5 record, but not Morton or Oliver or the Hot 5 or Bix. It just took me longer to find those records and to appreciate it.
Right.
You know, the 1960s technology, listening to King Oliver Jeanettes basically sounded like it was recorded underwater in a burlap sack compared to a good time jazz record in high fidelity.
Right.
So as technology improved and I got better transfers of these things, then I finally would say, oh, I see what everybody means by how great that band sounds. But it took a long time for me to find the classic jazz records and get going on that track. And that if I'd found that sooner, I'd probably be a better drummer now. But